Holy shit, we just actually finished MEGALOBOX, and it was pretty good.
It was anime.
It was anime. You know, it felt like it was the first show we watched from 2018 that was like high quality anime entertainment.
High production and...
Relatively, at least.
Yeah, it's like what you would expect out of a big show this season. Like a big show that's coming out this season that like a big studio's working on. Mm-hmm. That, you know, is marketed towards mainstream anime fans.
If you'd gotten into anime in like the mid-2000s, I think this would be like your expectation of what is average. You know? Like, not necessarily that if you had like watched everything, this is what you would consider average, but that like the kind of stuff that used to get brought to America, that used to be like promoted, that used to have DVDs out, was like typically of about this quality. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's anything special in the way that like a Cowboy Bebop or something is, where it's like, you know, this like auteur piece with a lot to say and like a really unique aesthetic and all that. It's just like a good, solid, entertaining show.
Yeah, you could say it's more influenced by shows of that era that were like that, like Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because it's like a, I don't know what its relationship exactly is to Ashita no Joe, but it's like the 50th anniversary Ashita no Joe series. It's about a boxer named Joe from the slums and his trainer. That's like the main similarity, you know, but I don't think the story really has anything to do with Ashita no Joe, which is like a 200 episode show. But like, it is funny that, yeah, it feels more like something from the 2000s than something from the 70s, you know. Although it does have like it has the ultra sketchy artwork, and I looked up the director of this show is somebody who's worked on a lot of stuff by Takeshi Koike, the guy who made Redline and the Lupin the Third, more modern Lupin the Third stuff. And like once I saw that, I was like, okay, I get where this guy's aesthetic has come from. But yeah, what'd you think about it?
It's highly entertaining. Great music.
The soundtrack is fantastic. That's probably the best thing about the show. It is a little corny, and that's where... So, for me, this show was, like, kind of a roller coaster of how I felt about it. I would say that the first few episodes, I was just like, okay, you know, it's a cool anime about guys fighting, you know? The characters have strong aesthetic persona. You know, maybe part of the reason I think it feels like the early 2000s is the main character looks like if Mugen and Spike were in a fucking super fuser. But like he's that type of guy, you know, 20-something, doesn't care about his life, basically, you know, like willing to throw himself away just for the sake of like the thrill of the ultimate fight. He's called Junk Dog. The OP is fucking phenomenal. Just this badass, like, odd time signature rock song.
It's lit.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Talking Heads guy is singing it, though. It's like whatever weird vocal effect they have going on.
Yeah.
I can't
David
unhear
Byrne.
it.
A Japanese David Byrne.
Yeah. But it's lit. It has furry imagery.
It's definitely, like, the number one OP I can see getting stuck in my head from the past
It's hype
year.
as fuck.
And
I would listen to it every time.
It's got badass junk dogs in it. You know, it's a perfect illustration of the character's sort of mentality. He's just this, like, ragged fucking beast from nowhere.
Didn't you say the first line is, like, I have no ID?
Yeah. ID I think is the first line. Yeah, it's pretty cool, and he's a cool guy, and he's the kind of guy you would want to see as, like, a main character whose arc you'd want to follow. He works for this guy, this old drunk boxing instructor who's, like, uses him to throw matches for the mafia for money, basically.
One thing I thought was really weird about that character in particular is, like, they started using scorpion imagery, but not until really late.
That got brought up mad late.
Yeah, it's like, they didn't really do that much to portray that until the very end.
Yeah. It's and like suddenly the guy calls him a scorpion.
Yeah.
And then it's like scorpion imagery all over the place.
Scorpions all over the place. But, like, it's cool. His character arc is pretty cool.
Yeah. the thing is that, like, the thing about the characters is that I was not immediately invested in them because they are very cliched, and I've seen them a lot, you know? Like, and that's fine. Obviously, the show just wanted to do, like, another take on this type of story, but with, like, a cool aesthetic, and just, hey, let's make a fun boxing show, but, like, the gimmick is that they use robotic arm adjustments.
Yes, let's make it relevant to the future, because nobody cares about boxing anymore. We gotta make it extreme.
Make it mechanical boxing, and then have the main character not use it. Makes perfect sense. There's a lot of weird stuff in this show where I would say it doesn't really try to follow a thread of logic, and as a result, it's difficult to care about the story, in my opinion. Like, I made that video, experiential versus contemplative media. This is an extremely experiential show. If you try to think about it, it will break. And that's fine. I don't think it was trying to make sense.
Guys beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah, it's like the technology, like the idea of this sport.
Yeah, don't think
is
too
ridiculous.
Much about him getting a fake ID and not having like any original identity, or like not being from any place, because like they even say they're from nowhere, and like it's such a crucial plot point that he doesn't have any kind of ID. But like if you start to think about it, like this is a fully fledged world, and you have characters from other parts of the world. Like why couldn't this guy work with another country? Why couldn't he
get
any
ID?
Kind of identification? Because obviously he's like a human.
They just don't bother explaining. They could have said, like, oh, he can't get an ID for X reason, and that would have been fine. But, like, they don't. They don't bother because they don't care. Because logic is not the concern in a show where they have boxing where you have mechanical arms that make you way more powerful, but there's nothing else is different. You're still taking those blows for the mechanical arms. I mean, it's kind of implied that if you have the mechanism, you can, you know, when you block with it, you won't get hurt as much. But, like, you're still gonna take blows to the body and face of these fucking arms, you know? It's totally ridiculous. Something that was really missing from the show was any fight with, like, anyone else not wearing the gear and someone wearing it. Because, like, Joe's whole thing is that he is just strong enough, he's resilient enough that he can fight without the gear and beat people who are wearing it. But it's never really clear how much stronger someone is with the gear than they would be without it, you know? And, like, it doesn't seem like it's a huge difference.
Yeah. In the one case where the guy is a Paralympic, obviously it's kind of like the gear is helping him overcome his disability and is making him more powerful. But, like, what advantage really is there to having the gear? And a lot of times, like, what Joe does is exploit the weakness in the gear. So why are they even boxing with the gears in the first place? Is it safer? Is it just because this company...
It can't be safer.
Is it, like, why is gear boxing more popular than other kinds of boxing? It's just...
It's, again, don't need to think about it. The point of the show is the main character is the ultimate underdog.
Is the main company the only company producing the gears?
Because, it can't be.
Because it seems like they're trying to get an alliance with the military, but if there were other companies making gears, why would they not already be utilizing this kind of machinery? Or is it just like, if you think about it too much, it's kind of like there's a lot of like things that doesn't explain. Or
so with that in mind, like it's difficult to buy into the world or the storyline or anything like that. So it's more about, like, do I care about these characters? Do I want to watch them fight? And, like, how exciting is it to watch them fight, you know? And in the first couple episodes, it's like the overall aesthetic of the show is strong. It has some good animation, especially, like, the opening scene in the first episode. Like, you know, it's like this gorgeous piece. Like, it's got great music, so we're, like, you know, coasting along on it's pretty good. Episode 3, it starts to get pretty corny and weird, but also it starts to flesh out the world a little bit more, and you've got, like, this sense of what it's like to live in the gutter and, like, the different strata of the technology and stuff. And, like, at this point, we don't know that Joe is eventually going to fight gearless. Like, early on, he's just fighting with shitty gear. And when it was revealed, it was kind of like, oh, you can just fight without it? Oh. You know, that's how I felt anyway. But then you get into the stretch of episodes 4 through 6, and somehow the show becomes amazing for this little stretch of episodes. All experientially, because they're super dense. The characters are more interesting.
One fight after another, you're introducing characters who are interesting and complex and have reasons to be entered in the tournament, and they all have different fighting styles, and you get to see some cool animation and like some cool music, and it's only the good stuff for those couple of episodes.
And the relationships are complicated. It's like you get introduced to a fighter, you really learn about their backstory, and there's like complex emotions at play. I mean, the 2-episode arc of 5 and 6 with the guy who had gotten blown up in the war. It's like you've got these themes of PTSD. You've got this long history between him and the coach where it's like, you know, you've got when they were training, when he went to war, when he came back and the coach didn't know he was still alive, and he like threw himself through the window of the boxing gym, and like just all these different like vignette pieces of history that all relate to it, and then how Joe relates to all that, how he puts up this opposition force of ideology of being like, hey, you know, you can fight against all this shit if you want, but like I'm gonna be your opponent in the ring. So like ultimately it's all on you how you decide to feel about this, you know, and he like sort of puts that in the guy's head. So those episodes, they just felt really tight and concise and thrilling, and I was like, wow, this show could be like a 9 out of 10 at that point. Like those 3 episodes, and even the one after that where they're setting up for the fight with Mikio, where it like all builds up. It's pretty obvious, like this show has a bit of a problem with being too on the nose sometime, because in episode 7 it's like the whole time they're just like, haha, everything's going so great, it's gonna be amazing, Joe's gonna go all the way, man, isn't it great that we got into the tournament, ha ha ha, wow, nothing could possibly go wrong. And then it's like the, you know, dramatic reveal, oh bitch, I know that you're not a fucking real citizen, and you're like, oh, but like they did that scene so well that it was like soul crushing. It was like, oh fuck, how are they gonna get out of this one? Then you get to the next episode, and this is where I really feel the show really went back down to the average level that I had put it at in the beginning. And I don't think it ever picked up past that again. I really felt like episode 8 was like, the point of the episode is just to realize that Mikio was bluffing because he doesn't actually have evidence to get them kicked out, which they could have figured out, you know, before, like, giving up and running away. Or it could have just been, like, after that dramatic downturn at the end of episode 6, or 7, it would have made no difference if they had realized right at the start of the new episode, wait a minute, Joe, don't throw this fight, because Mikio can't possibly actually know that you, like, if he actually knew, he could just prove it. Why does he have to say it to you in private, right? Instead, they throw the match, and then they spend an entire episode laboring over that realization and how they're going to get the match to happen again, you know? And then it just happens in the next episode. So it's like, that entire episode, to bridge that gap, the only realizations are that Mikio couldn't have truly done that, and them convincing the woman to let the fight happen anyways. And you could say that that's part of her character development, but it didn't need the whole episode to make that happen, you know? It didn't need to be stretched quite so far. And then you get to the actual fight with Mikio, and it's by far the least interesting fight in the show so far.
Even though it's the most hyped fight at this point.
It's like you've had 2 whole episodes of build-up.
The one that, like, if he doesn't get into this fight, he can't make it to the finals. Like, their whole plan's gonna be ruined. And they, like, built him up to be, like, this aggressive bad guy with, like, like, he has plans to overthrow the company. He's, like, he's out for revenge. And then after the fight, like, it just, you don't see this guy until the very end. Like, it just felt really anticlimactic.
It was really strange.
And also, like, the fight itself was not visually impressive.
No.
A lot of the shots were just, like, really janky, and
it was just like guys fighting kind of like certain other matches from the previous episodes that had these like big dramatic moments of like turnarounds in the fight, and the sound design is great and the visuals are great, and then you get to this fight and it starts in media res, which was already strange because you're just kind of like, oh, I guess it's happening, and like it's kind of implied that like if it weren't for the fact that this guy was relying so much on his gear, it's like, from this point in the show onward, it almost becomes that you have to go into each fight just thinking it's a sure thing that Joe would win if not for X circumstance. Because in the earlier fights, it's more a question of, is Joe good enough? Like, can he beat this boxer who is also great and has his own reasons for fighting? In the match with Mikio, it's kind of like, Joe wins because he fucking uses this he's relying too much on his gear. It's like, if it weren't for that fuck up, would Joe have won? And then in later matches, like against Yuri, it's like, well, would Joe have won if he had been using his gear? Like, it seems like Yuri almost beat him anyways. So, like, it was weirdly anticlimactic to me to have Yuri take his gear off. And I guess they just kind of figured, like, well, you probably expect Joe to win anyways, right? But it's like, well, what if he hadn't won? What if there had been a twist ending? What if there had been more at stake in the final battle? But instead it's like, Yuri takes his gear off, and he's the one with the disadvantage. Like, usually you want your hero to be the underdog in the fight, Usually you want him to be the one who you're worried won't win. But in the Mikio fight, it just feels like such a foregone conclusion, and like... And then in the Yuri fight, you're like, well, fucking the hero is the one who isn't having just fucking gone through, like, the most brutal experiment imaginable, Where Mikio's watching the show and he's like, oh yeah, he has to stand up after each round because he's been through so much from having the gear removed. It's like, I fucking almost want Yuri to win at that point,
Yeah.
Also, at the end, Yuri is in a wheelchair. Never explained.
Is it because the gear, like, ruined his body?
Is it just because Joe beat him so bad?
Yeah, Joe beat him in a wheelchair. Who knows?
No one explains why he's in a wheelchair.
I mean, his character arc was really weird. It was kind of like he was obedient until he felt a human emotion and then decided to completely ruin his body by removing the gear and, like... Yeah.
I mean, it felt weirdly like... The show kept trying to dissolve the very tensions that it had set up, where it's like the whole point of going, like, when they reveal that Joe is supposed to throw the first match of of what's it called? Megalonia?
Megalonia.
Like, they reveal that he's supposed to throw the first match. And you're thinking that, like, the drama will be, okay, like, he might not want to do it for the old man, but maybe, because he knows the kid could be in danger, he'll throw the fight for the kid's sake. Or, like, that will be the thing. And, like, he'll have to emotionally come to grips with that. But then the old man just puts the kid into the custody of the Shirato woman. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess the kid's safe. So why would Joe throw the match? But then it's kind of implied that Joe is going to throw the match. And it was never really clear to me whether he intended to throw the match or not until the kid showed up, and then it became that tension that I described. Like, he shows up, he's wearing the things, he's got the thing in his ear, and you never get, like, a picture into his mind, like, was he trying to just... Was he doing that to trick the...
I think it was more, he was just, like, they were trying to show that he was fighting selfishly and didn't, like... He wasn't obeying what the guy was telling him to do, even though he was, like, accepting...
Yeah, it was still implied that he was going to throw the match, though.
I think it was implied that he was just going to lose because he, like, had no spirit. His spirit was broken at that point because, like, nobody was there for him. Like, he didn't have his coach there to believe in him. And, like, at the end, when, like, he gets that reassurance from his rival and the kid shows up and his coach kind of stands up for himself, is when he's able to find the power within him to kind of overtake it. But, like, I don't think he wanted to throw it, but I think he was just going to lose because of the psychological pressure.
That was another part where it bothered me how much it seemed like it was taken for granted that if Joe wasn't trying to throw the match, he would have just obliterated this guy. Like, everybody just kind of takes it for granted, like, oh yeah, Joe is so good that there's no way he would... struggle like this unless he was trying to throw the match, And, like, the fact that, like, Yuri comes out and he's just like, oh, like, what are you doing? Why are you fighting like this? Yeah. And then he gets up and, like, instantly beats him. And
yeah, it's just in the last fight, he had already proven that he's beaten the best gear. and that he's like the best boxer, and then you kind of go into the next fight and he's like getting his ass kicked. Right. It's like hard to believe.
So it's implied that he is trying to lose. Like he's trying to throw the match, and then like he is inspired to not. But like, why was he trying to throw it? Like, did he just have a change of heart, or? I was just really lost about his motivations over the course of the match. I didn't really understand why he decided to throw it and then to not throw it. It was just like, I was constantly like wondering, like, is he trying to throw it or not? And then like, because at first I didn't think he was. I thought he was faking trying to throw it for some reason. You know, it was confusing. And then like, it seemingly the coach tearing out his eyeball just alleviated all that. It's like, oh, I guess the mob doesn't care anymore because he took his own eye out. And I mean, is it implied, was it meant to imply that this meant that after seeing this display, the mob now trusted them to win Megalonia and that would be enough to pay off their debt? And if so, why did they not address this in the finale and suggest, we paid off the mob debt?
There was no conclusion about that. I mean, assumedly that's what the plan always was that they were going to win and have the prize money to, like, pay off their debt. But it was just kind of like, yep, he gouged his eye out. That's like, they're not going to punish him. And it's like, I don't know. It was I didn't like it.
So if the mob didn't have faith that Joe could actually win Megalonia, then why not just like, okay, they were like, okay, you have to throw this match so that we can get the money because there's no chance you're gonna win. Well, why did he need to throw it if he wasn't gonna win? Just let him lose or win on his own terms. You know, like, if you think he can win, just let him win, and he'll get the prize money. Why do you need to bet against him? Again, trying to think about the story, like, really twisted my mind around.
In the end, it's, like, all to show the coach's character development. Like, this is he finally stood up and did the right thing, and, you know, did what he wasn't thinking selfishly anymore, and it's just, like, it's sad that the plot kind of has to get muddled down because they just wanted to have this guy have a badass moment, which wasn't really even that badass.
And I felt the same way about Yuri taking off his gear, that, like, yes, this makes Yuri more of a badass in the sense that, like, he is so dedicated to having a good fight that he would take the gear off. But then in the end, I'm like, well, now there's none of that. The narrative of the underdog guy is gonna beat the ultimate, you know, gear with his bare hands is now gone. And so, like, all this really is just a match between two guys. And at this point, the intrigue is meant to be like, okay, well, it's the ultimate showdown between two guys who really want to fight. How much do I care about these two guys? You know, is how I found myself thinking this in the final battle, because I was just kind of like, what's the drama of this? Like, she already signed the military deal. There's nothing else to this than these two guys want to fight. And, like, if the fight had been, like, mind-blowingly impressive, that would be fine. But it wasn't really. It wasn't that amazing of a fight. I felt like the earlier fights were better. The ones from episodes 4, 5, 6. And, you know, and I've seen other better fights in other boxing anime. I mean, if I could go watch Hajime no Ippo and see some really emotional, really crazy fights that have really impressive animation and you know, big, high thrills in their fights. Watching this one, it was just like, well, I guess this is the final match. I guess they're enjoying it. And then it kind of just, there's like a cross counter, and then it just, like, hard cuts to later. And it's like, I guess Joe won. Yeah. I guess Joe won. So, overall, I found myself, like, I was happy that the show was as good as it is, but I was disappointed that it wasn't as good as it was. Like, those 3 episodes had got my hopes up really high, and then when, like, even 4 episodes, because episode 7 was still really good, if I remember correctly, but from 8 onward, like, when I saw episode 8, I was like, I hope this was, like, the lame one. You know? And then episode 9 comes, and it's like the fight wasn't as good as the previous fights because there just wasn't as much going on. It's like, it was very straightforward.
And then all the final round fights were just like, they were not as interesting as the other fights that had more at stake.
Or the build-up. Like, just watching the characters just kind of hang out throughout episode 12 was odd. It was odd that there was no attempt to make the final battle more tense. It felt like, if anything, it was just shaving away all the tension so it could just be a fair fight between these two guys. And, like, it was just kind of a weird feeling of, like, oh, the story's already over. Why are we bothering with this fight?
Yeah.
You know? And it doesn't have the build-up of, say, like, for instance, the show Escryed is sort of legendary for having a similar kind of final battle, but, like, that show was like a, you know, guys versus the system, epic, you know, big, huge final battle happens, and then in the last episode, as like a follow-up, it's like the two rivals have this huge battle, and like the whole episode is just these two guys having the ultimate battle. And like in that case, it's like their rivalry has defined the show from start to finish. You've always wanted to see them have the ultimate throwdown, but they've become friends in the end. So it's like a friendly, but we have to test our powers against each other kind of thing. And that's what I felt like this was going for, but because Yuri was just kind of, you know, he was there at the start. He's hinted at throughout the show, but he doesn't have he doesn't have like chemistry with the main character.
Rival. Yeah. It's just like he's the opposite. He's somebody who is like being led by the corporation. He has like the best gear, and then we have the ragamuffin. But like, there's nothing really enduring.
The little kid's arc had no conclusion at all.
Yeah.
Like the little kid was trying to. I guess the company admitted that they didn't even admit publicly or anything. Like, there should have been a part where they show, like, the Shirato company, like, saying this kid's father was the one who created the gear, like, you know, give him posthumous credit. Like, the kid never really got revenge.
No.
He never got, I mean, maybe he just didn't care anymore. Maybe that was the idea, was that, like, after meeting her, he realized she was a good person. I don't really know who it was that had fucked over his dad in the company. Like, was it her dad? Was he a piece of shit? I don't know. Like, if she was so nice, why did he get fucked over in the first place? I'm not sure. And, like, it just felt unresolved. The whole time, I had always been expecting that when they got to Megalonia, because she says at one point, like, I'm not going to let someone without a gear fight in Megalonia. So I thought for sure that as they progressed in their... This is, like, my full expectation of the story. I thought that as they progressed fighting all these opponents, they were going to get sponsors. Like, that people were going to be backing Gearless Joe because he's a famous fighter. And that, like, everybody would want to have the gear that Gearless Joe used. Or that the kid was going to build him a gear. Because it's implied the kid is a gear mechanic. He knows how to work with them. Like, why was he even on the team if he wasn't going to be a gear mechanic? You know, like, that seemed like his purpose. Was like, oh, you got this guy who's going to train you to fight, and this guy who's going to build your gear, but then he fights with no gear for the whole show. It's kind of like, oh. I just felt like there was something left, something I was waiting for on a lot of parts, in a lot of places. And, you know, fair enough if that's not the story they wanted to tell, but the story they did tell did not blow my mind. It kind of left me confused. But, you know, even still, it was a fun show. I'm not going to say that it was bad. No. I'm not going to say that it was, like, unenjoyable. The music alone made it a lot of fun.
Super memorable music.
You know, some really strong visuals in places, and there were, like, 3 incredible episodes. It was just kind of like, man... Imagine if the whole show had been that good.
That good.
Imagine if, because like those 3 episodes, if it had all been that good, it would have been like ping pong level of like best sports anime, which I consider ping pong to be like, if you want to watch a one core sports anime, like not a full career that goes through like fucking seasons and seasons, but just like a tight 1 season show, ping pong is the best you're gonna do. And this show hits highs that are similar, not as aesthetically interesting or as well written, but like in terms of like the themes of those early episodes of like dealing with PTSD and like all that kind of shit were a lot more interesting. I can't really remember what the guy from episode 4 was that I enjoyed so much. I remember there being another fighter who was really interesting.
Oh, geez. I can't remember. Like,
Yeah,
everybody's
it was a few days
overshadowed
ago.
by the vet.
Yeah.
The veteran was, like, probably my favorite character.
But again, it's not. It's more a show that's just.
Feel.
Yeah, it's fun to watch when it's fun to watch.
Feel the power.
So yeah, I give it like a 7.5. I think it had moments where I thought it could be like a high 8 to a light 9, but it did not ultimately come out that way for me. Do you have a score?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a low 8. I enjoyed it, even though the ending wasn't like nail-biting, and I wasn't like completely satisfied with the ending. I thought it had enough going for it to be complete, like, hold my interest the whole time.
I probably would have given it closer to an 8 if not for the ending, because I thought the ending was just weird. It didn't really resolve the things I wanted to see resolved.
Yeah.
It kind of left me like, okay, everybody's having, like, why the fuck is Yuri in a wheelchair, and they're just like buddies now, I guess?
So
like, he just hangs out with Yuri on the beach.
For a second season by saying like there's going to be a second tournament in the next year. Do you think they're gonna?
I thought that was just meant to be the conclusion of her character arc, like to suggest that she cared enough about MEGALOBOX to, like, because they were kind of implying that she only did this tournament so that she could secure this deal with the government, but now she like sees a value in the sport itself because of what Yuri showed her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean...
Yeah, like, I didn't really see what they would be able to do with the second season.
Yeah.
Besides, like, introduce, like, bigger bad guys and, like, more badass gear, but...
I mean, Joe, there's no reason for Joe to go back and prove himself again. Yeah, it's pretty much over, I'd say.
So we made a bet.
I lost the bet. I bet $5 that the coach was going to have cyborg eyes at the end, and I lost.
In this futuristic society,
I can't believe they didn't give that motherfucker
eyes.
Cyborg eyes.
Unfortunately.
But that was the other thing, is like the whole way through, they, like, aside from escaping the mafia debt, they never really established what these guys were, like, gonna do with the money. I was like, is it gonna be... I had a suspicion they were just gonna go back to nowhere, because what the hell else are they gonna do? Like, but, I guess they open a boxing school. I guess they're teaching all the poor kids. Are the kids... Who's paying for it? Are they just doing it for free? Is it just like a, hey, we'll teach kids to box?
Maybe it's like a charity.
I guess they're just doing... I don't know how much money they have, you know? It seems like everybody likes them now, I guess. It just felt like, where's...
Is he a citizen now?
Right, shouldn't they have... Like, shouldn't there be even... Like, shouldn't he be a celebrity? Shouldn't he be, like, famous throughout the city? Shouldn't they have, like, a penthouse suite now? Like, did they go back to no... Did they just say, like, we're not about that life. We're gonna open a boxing school in the ghetto. And like, I mean, that's fine. I can see that being the case. It's just... Again, I felt like everything was underexplained for my liking.
Especially the resolution with the gang. Like, did they just give them the money? Like...
Yeah. Well, that's all I have to say about MEGALOBOX. I know I came off mostly negative, but it's just because of the fact that it's the kind of show that I know a lot of people probably like this show, and rightly so. It's entertaining, it's broad, it's the kind of show that makes me think, like, this is what... I remember early on, when we were in, like, the really good episodes, I was talking about how sorry I felt for people getting into anime now, that, like, they're gonna be bombarded with people telling them something like Bunny Girl Senpai is, like, anime of the year, and they're gonna watch it and they're gonna be like, what's this fucking autistic bullshit? But, like, if you show, like, any regular person MEGALOBOX, they'll be like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I can, like, think of people that I could just recommend the show to and they would enjoy it.
I know my mom wouldn't like it, because she'd be like, she would be bothered by all the dumb shit in the plot.
Yeah, you know? I thought that would bother me, and, like, I wasn't entirely hooked from the first episode, but after episode 2, just, like, it was, the whole package was enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, the music, the visuals, like, I could appreciate it for its own merits and not take it too seriously, and I had a good time with it.
Yeah.
I recommend it to anybody who's looking to watch shows this season.
It's definitely worth a watch. I mean,
watch
if you like
recent shows.
If you want to watch a show that has some pretty good fights in it, I mean, if you want to watch guys beat each other up, which is, you know, one of the things we come to anime
OP,
for.
If you care about anime,
OP is fucking awesome. The soundtrack is good as it is, though. There's also weird fucking scenes, like where the kid starts rapping.
Yeah, when
out of nowhere, and then it just cuts away.
And it didn't sound great.
Yeah, the show takes these... I thought he was a pretty good
I don't know.
actor,
I felt like it was supposed to be, like, hype and, like inspirational, and it just was like,
it doesn't
what are
lead
they
to anything,
doing?
though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scenes where it just kind of goes down little avenues and then doesn't really amount to anything. I mean...
I wasn't feeling it.
This is a first-time director. I think he tried to do some unique stuff, but ultimately just it didn't come together in, like, the right package. I feel like he was trying to be a little artsy, but, like, is maybe not far enough along to do that as a director.
I mean, I think for somebody's first directorial work, this is great, and like somebody to keep an eye on at the very least.
Yeah. I want to mention that there's one song that was in like the last episode, I think, or maybe the second to last, that is straight up a Run the Jewels beat. Like, straight copy. I think it's from Christmas Fucking Miracle. Like, if you just took out the jingle bells at the start. But it was, like, the same chord progression, same, like, rising, same... It sounded in the same way that a lot of anime soundtrack music is rip-offs of other music. Like, like, Nico Pole is Points of Authority by Linkin Park, as I proved on my SoundCloud. If anyone hasn't heard that, look it up. But, yeah, it's a Run the Jewels song.
Are you gonna try to rap over any of the beats?
I had thought about it. That was a funny thing, because, like, right from the first episode, I was like, man, there are some beats in this show I could definitely rap over. But whether or not I wanted to do it was really going to come down to how much I liked the show. Because if I had really loved the show, I wouldn't have been able to stop myself, you know? If I only feel kind of okay about it, I feel like there's lots of other people who would want to rap on these beats, and it's almost like I'd rather leave it to somebody who's, like, a huge... Like, I could easily imagine some other rapper seeing this show, absolutely loving it, jumping on the beats, doing some nerdcore shit, you know, But that's just, like, a weird fantasy in my brain. Like, that's just the logic that I operate on, so... I always have fucking weird reasons for why I choose what I do, but,
hey man, if it's not...
I might... If people, hey, let me know. Do you want me to rap over Megalobox beats? Or are you like, don't you dare fucking ruin those beats for me? Just let me know.
Save it for the professionals.
Hey, man.
I'm teasing.
I've made enough money off my raps to consider it a profession. No, I haven't. Alright, I think that's all we have to say about Megalobox. See you in the next one.
Megalo out.